Some stories aren't bound by time. They move through generations, carried by whispers and fear. This is one such story. A haunting so powerful, it left behind a curse that still breathes in the hills of Tennessee. This is the tale of the Bell Witch, the spirit that refused to be forgotten. Adams, Tennessee. The year was 1817, a quiet farming town where the days were slow and the nights were silent. The Bell family had worked the land for years, their farm thriving under John Bell's careful hand. The countryside stretched endlessly, cornfields, oak trees, and the occasional flicker of lanterns in the distance. Beneath that calm, something had awakened. It began one evening when John Bell saw a strange creature in the cornfield, an animal unlike anything he'd ever seen, half dog, half rabbit with eyes that gleamed like burning coals. He fired his gun, but when the smoke cleared, it was gone. That night the sounds began, faint knocking, then scratching from within the walls. At first, they dismissed it as animals or wind, but soon the disturbances grew bolder. Bedsheets were torn away in the night. Children felt invisible hands tugging their hair. The family's youngest daughter, Betsy, began to scream from unseen blows, red marks appearing across her skin. Neighbors who stayed overnight swore they heard voices, whispering hymns, mocking prayers. The voice called itself Kate Bat's Witch, claiming to seek revenge against John Bell for a past debt. It was intelligent, cruel, and seemed to know every secret the family tried to hide. Word spread across the county. Ministers came to pray. Travelers came to witness. Some said the voice recited sermons. Others said it sang old hymns in a voice too beautiful to belong to something so vile. Even General Andrew Jackson, before becoming president, is said to have visited the Bell home and fled after one night, declaring, "I'd rather fight the British than the Bell Witch." As years passed, the haunting centered more fiercely on John Bell. His health failed, his mind weakened. In 1820, he was found lifeless in bed, with a small vial of dark liquid beside him. When the family asked the spirit what it was, the voice laughed. "I gave old Jack a dose of that last night." After his death, the witch's visits slowed, but she promised to return in 7 years. True to her word, she did, and then vanished again. Yet to this day, locals say her presence never truly left. The cave near the old Bell farm is still feared, said to echo with whispers and laughter when the wind falls silent. Some call it folklore. Others, a case of collective madness. But for those who have heard the stories in the dark hills of Tennessee, the Bell Witch remains more than a tale. She's a warning. In the early 1800s, Adams, Tennessee was nothing more than a small, scattered farming community resting quietly along the Red River. Rolling fields stretched across the countryside, dotted with log cabins, small barns, and endless trees that swayed with the rhythm of southern wind. It was the kind of place where everyone knew one another, where news traveled slowly, faith ruled daily life. The air smelled of tilled earth and wood smoke. Nights were long, dark, and silent, so silent that you could hear the crack of a twig 100 feet away. John Bell, a respected farmer and father of 9, had settled here with his family around 1804. He was a hardworking man, strict but fair and well-liked in the community. His wife, Lucy, gentle and devout. A woman others described as pure, hearted, the kind of soul no darkness could touch. Together they had built a comfortable life on the land they owned, property surrounded by forest and fields that seemed to stretch endlessly into the unknown. Life on the Bell farm moved with a steady rhythm. The roosters crowed at dawn, the children tended to chores, and the family gathered every evening to pray. But something about that land, the stillness, the quiet, carried a weight few noticed at first. The locals spoke of strange shapes in the distance, of whispers along the riverbanks at night, travelers who felt watched as they passed through the woods. These were small-town superstitions, the kind most people laughed off. But sometimes, the land remembers things long after people forget them. By 1817, John Bell's farm had grown prosperous. His reputation was strong and his family respected. Yet, in those same months, neighbors began to whisper. Some said they saw lights in the woods, not lanterns or campfires, but faint orbs that glided just above the ground, weaving through the trees like living things. Others claimed that animals acted strange near the Bell property, as if uneasy, refusing to approach certain corners of the field. Then there was the story about the woman, Kate Batts, a nearby resident known for her sharp tongue and eccentric behavior. She and John Bell had once been friends, but something had turned bitter between them. A land dispute, a misunderstanding, or maybe something deeper. People said she felt cheated by him, and when her health began to fail, she swore vengeance. Rumors spread that she dabbled in old practices, muttering strange prayers under her breath, speaking names no one recognized. Whether those claims were true or not, one thing was certain: Her name would soon become forever tied to the curse that fell upon the Bell family. The first odd occurrence came one evening, as John was inspecting his cornfield. The sun had just set, painting the horizon blood red. Between the rows of stalks, something moved, slow, deliberate. He thought it was an animal, perhaps a dog or a fox, until it stepped into the open. What stood before him was wrong, impossible to name. It was shaped like a large dog, but its head was grotesque, more like a rabbit's skull, stretched and warped. Its eyes burned red, reflecting the dying light. John raised his rifle, fired once, and watched it vanish without a sound. There was no cry, no rustle, no sign of a body, only the faint smell of sulfur in the air. That night, as the family gathered inside, house felt colder than usual. The fire crackled weakly. Lucy asked John what was wrong, but he said nothing. Later, as the lamps dimmed and silence settled over the farmhouse, a sound echoed through the hallway, a dull, deliberate knock against the doorframe. One, then two, then three. When John opened the door, there was nothing. No wind, no footsteps, no sign of life. Just the sound of the river in the distance and the uneasy feeling that something unseen was standing nearby, watching. In the following days, the noises returned, soft scratching under the floors, faint tapping along the walls. The family blamed mice at first or shifting wood, but the sounds grew louder, clearer. At times, they seemed to travel, moving from room to room like footsteps, circling the house. The Bell children whispered about voices, faint ones that seemed to echo through their dreams. Lucy dismissed it as imagination, but even she began to feel uneasy when her prayers at night were followed by the creak of the bedposts and the soft sound of breathing. When no one else was there, the Bell farm began to change in ways no one could explain. Tools went missing and reappeared in impossible places. Doors latched themselves. Livestock were found injured, their tracks leading nowhere. Visitors noticed the atmosphere too. A heavy tension in the air, as if the land itself had grown restless. The church congregation began to talk. Some said it was the devil, punishing the Bells for pride. Others said it was witchcraft, the work of Kate Batts fulfilling her final curse. But whispers only fueled fear, and fear gave life to the legend that was beginning to take shape. By late autumn, the disturbances had grown bold. Family heard faint laughter at night, a woman's laughter, distant and mocking. Objects moved across the table as they ate. The knocks turned into pounding, loud enough to shake the floorboards. John Bell tried to keep calm, to maintain control. The fear in his family's eyes told him what he already knew. Whatever had entered their home was not leaving soon. Adams was no longer a quiet town. Neighbors began visiting, curious and afraid. Some claimed they saw strange shadows moving behind the Bells' windows, even when the family was away. Others refused to come near the property at all. The line between superstition and truth was starting to blur, and the Bells stood at the center of something they couldn't begin to understand. The peace that once defined the Bell farm had been replaced by unease. The nights grew longer, the sounds louder. The family prayed harder, but the more they prayed, the stronger the presence seemed to grow, feeding on their fear, their faith, and their disbelief all at once. And soon, what began as a whisper in the dark would speak clearly for the first time. The first signs of the haunting crept into the Bell household so quietly that no one could say exactly when it all began. What started as mild disturbances soon became a nightly ritual of terror that defied every explanation. By late 1817, Bell family's home was no longer a place of rest, but a stage where something unseen performed its cruel games in the dark. At first, it was the sounds. Scratches beneath the floorboards, faint and scattered, like a small animal burrowing where no animal should be. The noises moved from room to room, sometimes right beneath their feet. John Bell ordered the floorboards checked, traps set, even the walls opened in places, but nothing was ever found. No rats, no nests, no source at all. The family dismissed it, as people do, telling themselves that the mind can make mischief of its own. When fear whispers in the dark, the sound never stopped, it only changed. Before long, the noises turned deliberate. Heavy knocks on the door when no one was outside, thumps against the walls that came in patterns, as though someone, or something, was trying to communicate. The knocking grew bolder, sometimes echoing in threes, sometimes responding when spoken to. The Bells would sit together at night, listening, holding their breath, waiting for the next sound. Each time they thought it was over, another thud would rattle through the timbers of the old farmhouse, as if reminding them it was still there. Soon, the disturbances began to touch their lives in stranger ways. When Lucy Bell prepared meals, utensils would vanish and reappear in odd places. The hearth, the barn, even outside in the dirt. Bedding was pulled off the children in their sleep, their pillows thrown to the floor. Small stones and pieces of wood occasionally dropped from nowhere, landing softly near their feet, as though tossed by invisible hands. Betsy, their young daughter, often complained that something whispered her name in the night. When she turned toward the sound, there was nothing but the cold breath of still air brushing against her cheek. The livestock, once calm and obedient, began acting wild. Horses would rear up in their stalls, eyes rolling in panic. Chickens refused to roost near the barn. The dogs barked at corners of empty rooms, growling and retreating with tails between their legs. John Bell tried to hold the family together, insisting it was nonsense, that there had to be a natural cause. The weight of fear in the house was growing too thick to ignore. One night, as the family gathered for evening prayer, a voice interrupted their silence. Not a loud voice, but clear and sharp enough that every person in the room heard it. It was a low whisper, faint but distinct, repeating the Lord's Prayer right along with them. Lucy's hands trembled, her voice breaking as the unseen speaker recited every word perfectly. When the prayer ended, the voice laughed soft, mocking, and horribly human. From that night forward, the voice returned again and again. At first, it was only a murmur, words too faint to make out. But each passing week, it grew stronger, more articulate, as though learning the rhythm of human speech. It began to call out their names. It sang hymns, mocked their conversations, even recited Bible verses. The entity seemed to understand not just their words, but their thoughts. It would answer questions they hadn't spoken aloud, finishing their sentences with uncanny timing. Neighbors heard of the strange happenings. Curiosity drew them to the Bell home. They arrived in groups, men armed with rifles, women clutching crosses and candles. But what they witnessed silenced their doubts. During one gathering, as John Bell prayed aloud, the same disembodied voice joined in, echoing from every corner of the room. Then, without warning, chairs shifted, the walls shuddered, and a heavy book fell from a shelf onto the floor, landing open on a passage about evil spirits. The visitors fled before morning. Word of the haunting spread through Adams like wildfire. The small town became divided. Some believed the Bells were cursed, others thought it was a cruel trick or even mass hysteria. Yet as more people came to witness the strange events, fewer could deny what they heard and saw. The voice would speak to anyone, often revealing things it shouldn't know. Private details about their lives, hidden sins, secrets whispered in confidence. Whatever it was intelligent, and it was cruel. The Bell children suffered the most. Betsy's torment grew unbearable. She complained of invisible hands tugging at her hair, pinching her, slapping her face. On several nights, marks appeared on her skin, red welts and bruises with no visible cause. Sometimes her cries would echo through the house, followed by the sound of laughter, female laughter, cold and gleeful. Lucy would rush to her daughter's side, praying desperately, only to hear the voice mock her faith. "Your prayers can't save her, Lucy. She belongs to me tonight." Even John Bell began to feel its presence in his own body. His mouth would twist, his tongue grow stiff, as if something unseen was trying to silence him. He would wake gasping, unable to speak, while the voice whispered from the darkness beside his bed. It called him Old Jack Bell, in a tone dripping with hatred. Neighbors started to claim the spirit had a purpose, that it sought John's death and would not rest until it had taken him. The more they resisted, the more violent the manifestations became. Objects hurled themselves across rooms, doors slammed hard enough to splinter their frames. The laughter became louder, insults sharper. Even the most skeptical neighbors could not deny the evidence of their own senses. The haunting was no longer confined to the Bell home. It followed them wherever they went, into town, to church, even out in the fields. People began referring to the presence by name, the Bell Witch. And when asked who she was, the voice answered clearly, "I am Kate. You know what you did." No one understood what that meant, but the way it spoke John Bell's name left no doubt. This was personal. By now, fear had replaced reason in the Bell household. Every creak, every whisper of wind became a possible threat. The family barely slept, knowing that whatever haunted them grew stronger each night. It was learning, it was feeding, and it was far from finished with them. By the winter of 1819, the haunting had reached a level that no one in Adams, Tennessee could ignore. The Bell Witch was no longer just a whisper in the night or a faint knock on the walls. It was a presence that dominated the Bell family's lives completely. The entity, which called itself Kate, seemed to feed on fear, growing more powerful, more intelligent, and more cruel with every passing day. The Bell home had become a prison of dread, its once warm halls now echoing with unseen laughter and cries for mercy. John Bell, once a strong and proud man, was fading fast. His face had grown pale, his eyes sunken from sleepless nights. The voice targeted him constantly, hissing insults and curses, calling him Old Jack Bell with venomous contempt. "I will kill you," it would whisper, sometimes in his ear, sometimes across the room, as if the air itself carried the words. Even during church gatherings, the voice would interrupt prayers, mocking the pastor, shouting obscenities that chilled the congregation. Those who once doubted now refused to enter the Bell home at all. The physical assaults had grown unbearable. Betsy continued to suffer violent attacks. Her hair was yanked, her clothes torn, and she would often collapse from exhaustion after nights of relentless torment. Neighbors witnessed it firsthand, marks appearing on her skin as she screamed for help, with nothing visible causing them. Some tried to hold her, to shield her from whatever force lashed out at her, but even they were pushed back by invisible blows. The witch seemed to enjoy their horror, often laughing and taunting them as they tried to protect the girl. But the most terrifying moment came one cold night, when the family gathered in their small parlor, desperate for peace. Lucy Bell clutched her Bible, reading aloud verses through trembling lips. The house was still for a moment, eerily calm, before a violent gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing every candle. In the suffocating darkness, the voice erupted, shrieking so loudly it rattled the windows. "You can't hide from me, John Bell! I'll have your soul!" A loud crash followed. A chair toppled, glass shattered, and Betsy began to scream. When the candles were relit, the family saw deep red marks across her neck, as though hands had wrapped around her throat. Lucy fell to her knees in prayer, but the voice only mocked her, repeating every line she said with perfect imitation before bursting into cruel laughter. That night, even the strongest men who'd come to help refused to stay after sundown. The witch began to show an unnatural knowledge of distant events. It could describe what neighbors were doing miles away, what preachers said in other towns, even what travelers on the road were wearing. News spread fast that the spirit knew things no human possibly could. When a man named William Porter tried to confront it, claiming he feared nothing, the witch attacked him in his sleep. He awoke to find himself being dragged from bed by invisible hands, his body lifted and thrown against the wall. The next morning, he left Adams and never returned. For years, people tried to reason with it. Ministers prayed. Neighbors demanded it stop. But the entity only seemed to grow bolder. It could change its voice at will, sometimes sounding like a child, other times like an old woman. It would sing hymns sweetly, only to shift suddenly into laughter so harsh it made the walls vibrate. It called itself Kate, and at times claimed to be the spirit of Kate Batts, John's former neighbor who had died, cursing him for cheating her in a land deal. Yet at other times it denied being her at all, suggesting something older, something far more ancient and malicious. As John's health declined, the witch's torment became focused almost entirely on him. He developed a strange trembling in his face and jaw, as though his muscles were being seized by an unseen force. His speech slurred, his limbs weakened. Doctors could find no cause. The witch would mock him relentlessly, laughing when he tried to eat, whispering poison into his ears. "Old Jack Bell," it said one night, "soon you'll be mine." In December of 1820, John's condition worsened dramatically. He could barely rise from bed. Lucy cared for him tirelessly, though even she began to feel the weight of exhaustion and despair. On the morning of December 19th, John's son went to fetch his medicine from the cupboard, only to find a small vial of strange black liquid that no one recognized. When asked, the witch's voice broke the silence. "I gave him a dose last night. He'll never get up again." Within hours, John Bell was dead. His breathing had slowed to a stop, his face twisted in agony. As the family wept, the witch's laughter filled the house. It sang gleefully, mocking his death with a hymn twisted into something unholy. Even at his funeral, the spirit would not rest. It was heard laughing and singing loudly as mourners gathered to pray for his soul. Those who attended said the sound echoed through the trees long after the service ended. After John's death, the Bell Witch's activity began to subside, as if it had achieved what it came for. The torment grew quieter, the voice less frequent, until it eventually faded altogether. But its silence was never comforting. It was the kind of quiet that follows after something terrible, when you know the storm has passed, but the ground beneath you is still trembling. The Bell family tried to move forward, yet none of them were ever the same again. Betsy, still scarred from years of torment, broke off her engagement to a local boy after the witch warned her not to marry him. The fear of its return haunted her for the rest of her life. Lucy lived on in sorrow, her faith shaken but unbroken, clinging to prayer even when heaven seemed distant. The townspeople, once eager to gossip, now avoided the subject altogether. They refused to speak the witch's name at night, fearing it might return at the sound of its own legend. But those who ventured near the Bell property claimed they could still hear faint laughter on the wind, drifting through the trees, as if something unseen was still there. Watching, waiting, remembering. After John Bell's death, an uneasy calm settled over the town of Adams. The Bell Witch, once so loud and cruel, seemed to fade into silence. The nightly attacks stopped, the mocking voice disappeared, and for the first time in years, the Bell family slept through the night without the sound of knocking or laughter in the dark. Yet peace did not return so easily. The house still felt heavy, as though the walls remembered what they had witnessed. Every corner seemed to hum with the echo of something that had once lived there. Something that had spoken, taunted, and killed. Neighbors approached the Bells with cautious sympathy. Some still believed that the family had invited evil upon themselves. Others thought it had been a punishment, divine or otherwise, meant to expose hidden sins. But many, especially those who had heard the voice with their own ears, knew there was something far more mysterious at work, something that no prayer, no logic, and no science could ever explain. Lucy Bell continued to live on the property with her remaining children, her faith tested but unbroken. She spoke rarely about what had happened, though her eyes often wandered to the dark corners of the house when the nights grew long. Betsy, scarred both physically and emotionally, withdrew into herself. She was once a bright, cheerful girl, but the haunting had stolen something from her that she could never recover. Even as she grew older, she spoke of the voice that tormented her in whispers, afraid that speaking too loudly might call it back. In 1821, about a year after John Bell's death, the witch returned, briefly. The voice was heard again one night, calm and almost satisfied, claiming that it would be gone for 7 years. And true to its word, it vanished. For a while, Adams went back to normal. Crops grew, children played, and people stopped locking their doors at night. The story of the Bell Witch became a dark tale told in hushed tones, a warning more than a memory. Then, in 1828, exactly 7 years later, the voice returned once more. This time, it did not come with violence or fury, but with strange calmness. It spoke to John Bell Jr., one of John's sons, engaging him in deep conversation about faith, life, and death. The discussions reportedly lasted for several weeks, as if the spirit had come not to torment but to teach, or perhaps to boast about what it had done. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone again. After that, the Bell Witch was never heard in the same way again. The haunting ceased, but stories continued to spread, carried by word of mouth and fear. Travelers who passed through Adams claimed they saw strange lights over the old Bell property. Some said they heard faint laughter in the fields. Others swore they saw a shadowy woman drifting among the trees near the river. Even the animals seemed to sense it. Dogs barked at empty air. Horses refused to cross certain paths. As decades passed, the tale of the Bell Witch grew into legend. Historians, skeptics, and believers all tried to explain what had happened. Some said it was a hoax, a shared delusion fed by hysteria and superstition. Others claimed it was a poltergeist, perhaps born from Betsy's fear and energy, manifesting as a living entity. Then there were those who believed it truly was Kate Batts, a vengeful spirit returning from the grave to exact justice for a wrong she never forgot. The more people tried to explain it, the deeper the mystery became. Some researchers suggested that the haunting was tied to the land itself. The Bell property sat near the Red River, an area rich in limestone caves and ancient burial sites. Locals spoke of strange lights and ghostly figures long before the Bell family settled there. Even today, the nearby Bell Witch Cave is said to echo with strange sounds, voices whispering in the dark. Visitors have reported sudden chills, footsteps following them through the tunnels, and unseen hands brushing against their skin. Whether the cave truly connects to the original haunting or simply feeds the legend, no one can say for certain. In later years, the Bell Witch became more than just a story. It became part of Tennessee's folklore, woven into the state's history. Writers, journalists, and even presidents spoke of it. Andrew Jackson himself, who was said to have visited the Bell property during the height of the haunting, reportedly declared, "I had rather face the entire British Army than spend another night with the Bell Witch." His words carried the weight of belief from a man who had faced real battlefields, not ghost stories. But for the Bell family, there was no pride in the legend. They carried the memory quietly, passing down what they knew through generations. Some of John Bell's descendants refused to speak of it at all, fearing that acknowledging the witch might bring her back. Others embraced the story as part of their heritage, guarding the truth of what happened within the walls of that farmhouse. Even in the modern era, investigators and historians continue to search for answers. Books, documentaries, and reports have all tried to separate fact from fiction, but the line remains blurred. Some claim to have captured recordings of voices near the Bell Witch Cave, faint whispers saying names that no one present knew. Others leave the area shaken, swearing they felt watched, followed, or touched by something unseen. To this day, no one can fully explain the Bell Witch haunting. It stands as one of the oldest and most detailed accounts of supernatural phenomena in American history. Witnessed by dozens, documented by preachers, neighbors, and even government officials, it defies easy dismissal. Was it truly a spirit, a curse, or something darker, something that fed on fear itself, using belief as a doorway? The town of Adams still carries the weight of its legend. The Bell property remains quiet now, its fields grown over, the echoes of its past hidden beneath layers of soil and time. Yet visitors who stand there at dusk often describe the same feeling. The sense of being watched, the air growing still, the wind whispering through the trees as if speaking a name. And though centuries have passed, the story has never died. It lingers, patient and listening, as if waiting for someone to speak of it again. Some tales end in silence, but silence does not mean peace. It only means the voice has changed, the whisper has learned patience. In the heart of Tennessee, the wind still carries a name spoken once in fear, and never forgotten. They say if you listen near the Red River at night, you can still hear her laughter threading through the trees, soft as smoke, cold as memory. Time buried the house, but not the echoes that lived inside it. The Bell Witch is not gone. She sleeps beneath the roots, breathing through the soil, waiting for someone to remember. And when they do, when her name is spoken aloud again in the dark, perhaps she'll stir, perhaps she'll smile, and whisper, "I was never gone, you only stopped listening." If you've listened this far, perhaps the Bell Witch has already found you. But before she does, remember this: stories like these never truly end. They only wait for someone to tell them again. I'm your narrator from Arcane Testament, where the unseen speaks and the forgotten is never silent. If you wish to walk deeper into the unknown, subscribe and keep the light close, because next time the story might be listening for you.